Hello and welcome to this episode of World History 1 with your favorite world history teacher, Coach Bowman. Today we're going to look into the monotheistic religion of Islam. This is part 1, the geography and origins of Islam. So please make sure you have the right set of notes in front of you to fill out as we get ready to start. So when we talk about Islam, we got to talk about the geography of where it began, and that is in the Middle East, which is primarily mostly desert. It's very arid. That word means dry. So if you go to the grocery store and look for deodorant and you find arid, dry deodorant, that's kind of an you're saying dry deodorant, so it must keep you dry, I guess. So anyway, so arid means dry. The main desert that we're going to be focusing on is the Arabian Desert, which can be found on the Arabian Peninsula. Another thing that we need to talk about is the term oasis. Oasis is an area where underground spring has broken through the desert floor, causing it to pool or pond, sometimes becoming I want to go and say a lake, but a nice stream where it allows plants to grow. Trees can actually grow around it as well. So if you're talking about a desert climate, an oasis is kind of like, in my opinion, a rest stop in the sense where not only especially if you're in a caravan, which is where you have several animals traveling together for the purpose of trade. And so, again, these oases become a rest area for not only the animals, but for those involved in the trade routes. As I mentioned, we were talking about the Arabian Peninsula. This is to the east of Egypt. So you have the Red Sea that separates it from Egypt to the south or southwest. You have the Arabian Sea directly to the south, and then the Persian Gulf to the north or northwest of that peninsula. Again, peninsula has water on three sides. Please keep away from saying it's surrounded by water on three sides, because if it's surrounded by water, it's not a peninsula, it's an island. So here is an image of an oasis. As I said, obviously this stream has been happening for a very long time. The fact that you have huge palm trees, another type of plant life that surrounds it. So very big contrast with the desert dunes around it, surrounding it, and then you have this nice fresh stream that you can relax in, kind of like a lazy river to me. Again, we're talking about the Arabian Peninsula. Again, you've got the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and then the Persian Gulf there. So before we talk about Islam, we need to talk about what was happening in the Middle East, around the Arabian Peninsula. First of all, it was not unified. There was no major governing force. There was no bond between the different groups of people in the Middle East. So we have multiple tribes or clans that clashed, I guess you can say. Again, leading to conflict over land, over just basically land rights, bragging rights, whatever you want to call it. The economy at the time, again, this is all before Islam began, was pretty much a herding economy. Again, it's a desert climate, so you don't have a lot of farming going on. Very hard to grow stuff in a desert. But Bedouin is basically another word for nomadic. So they still use this today throughout the Middle East. There's a modern photograph there to the right of sheep and goats, which again, they will shear for the wool. They would actually use, you can have milk from the goats. You can use the meat from the goats as well, or sheep, wherever they are. So again, the wealth was truly based on the amount of animals you had. So it wasn't like how much money you have in the bank. So that's something that's kind of a different aspect as well. The religion at the time, again, I'll say it, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but this is all before Islam started. So in the Middle East, it wasn't unified, lots of tribes, and they were very polytheistic. So multiple gods as well. So again, it could have been clashes over the different ideologies, the different gods and goddesses, and things of that nature that each clan felt was more important than the other. So how does this religion start? It starts in the year 622 AD. All right, remember it's 622 AD. All right, we've already talked about Rome has already collapsed. Rome has fallen apart at this time. We're looking at probably around the time of Justinian with the Byzantine Empire. All right, so kind of give you a time frame on that. 622 AD, a very wealthy man named Muhammad had a dream. Muslims call it a revelation from Allah. Remember So the word Allah is Arabic for God. So we'll use that term a lot when in regards to this presentation. Arabic is the language used throughout the Middle East, as well as for those who do practice Islam. So this revelation from Allah told Muhammad that he was to be the last great prophet, and that. Sorry about that. We've got some construction going on next door, so I'm just going to keep going. And if you hear background noise, you hear background noise. One of those days. Anyway, so Muhammad gets known as the last great prophet. He's known as the prophet. So when we talk about Islam, the word Muhammad and prophet kind of go hand in hand. So keep that in mind. At least that's what I'm trying to get to say. So keep in mind, we're talking about the Middle East. And around 622, you have a lot of polytheistic views. And so here comes Muhammad preaching about believing in one God. So it's very, very similar to what was happening if you go back 3, 4, 5,000 years before him to Abraham, and how Abraham was doing the exact same thing, preaching about one God. But to Abraham, his God was Yahweh, the Jewish God. So a lot of people kind of are curious as to, are these gods all the same? Again, it truly depends on what they believe. I'll put it to you this way, and you can take it for what it's worth. To me, my dad, I call him Dad. To his friends and other family members, he goes by Dave. To my two sons, Hudson and Wyatt, they call him Granddad. So we're talking about one person, my dad, and the relationships that he has with other people determine what he is called. So likewise, that's my personal thought. You can take it for what it's worth. So there's my 2 cents. So going back to Muhammad. Muhammad's going around saying there's only one God and people should believe in him. And what this is going to do is cause problems with those that feel strongly about the polytheistic beliefs. And in turn, Muhammad and his family have to leave the city of Mecca. They are fleeing it for their life. They're being threatened. And so they go to a city called Medina. These 2 cities are extremely important to the faith of Islam. This is what is known as the Hijra, what's known as the Great Flight, when he leaves Mecca to go to Medina. While in Medina, Muhammad begins to preach the same thing about the belief in one God, Allah, and people start listening. And so it's really a big push, a big starting point, I guess you can say, for Muhammad and Islam in Medina. And in turn, once he starts getting a crowd, a following, he starts to spread. The religion starts to spread. So here's a map of Islam. And again, I cannot read Arabic, but I can imagine the starting point here would be Mecca, and you travel north to Medina. Oh, looky there. It says Mecca to the south. What did you know? And Medina to the north. So, what are some traditional beliefs of Islam? Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is monotheistic, belief in one God, and that God to the Islamic faith is Allah. The Quran, there's two ways of spelling Quran, with a Q or a K. Please make sure you're familiar with both, because if and when we do have an SOL, I cannot dictate or predict which spelling they will be using. So be familiar with both. All right, big thing, do not call this the Muslim Bible. Bible is a Christian term, so we will call the Quran the holy book of Islam. It contains the word given to Muhammad from Allah. In the Islamic faith, they do accept the Judeo-Christian prophets. When we say Judeo-Christian, if you look at it, it looks like Jew, Christianity, and that's what it is. These prophets that the Jews and Christians believe, such as Moses, Abraham, and even Jesus, they see them as prophets. They see them as messengers of God, good, holy men. The difference between, remember, the big thing about Jesus and the Christian faith is that the Christians believe Jesus is the Son of God. That's the only monotheistic religion that believes that. Jews and Muslims only see him as a person, as a holy man, a prophet. And then you have the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars are the responsibilities that a Muslim should do throughout their life. These 5 pillars are basically your cornerstones that you have to do. And they are your commitment or your statement of faith to Islam. That's a big one. In the Christian faith, when I was in 6th grade, I went through what's called confirmation class in the Methodist Church, where our minister, for a whole month, Sunday after church, we would meet for a couple hours, and we would talk about certain things in the Christian faith and what it meant, the symbolism behind the communion, talk about the Lord's Prayer and broke the Lord's Prayer down, those type of things. And then once we got through the class, we stood in front of the church and stated our commitment of faith. Pillar number 2, and again, this is not an order of importance. This is just a listing, so just keep that in mind. Praying 5 times a day facing Mecca. All right, that's a very important thing there. Eventually, why Mecca becomes important is because, remember, Mecca is where Muhammad started. He hoped to start Islam there, and he got ran out. Once he got to Medina and they got a following, they went back to Mecca and basically created this altar, had this huge structure there. And we'll talk about that a little later on. I don't think in this presentation, but in the second presentation, definitely. But Mecca, it becomes the center point of Islam, and that's the reason why it is a responsibility, is the key point where Muslims face to when they pray. And as you can see by the illustration, there's a prayer rug. If those of you that see me in person, there is a red prayer rug on the wall by my desk. And so if you look at it, next time you're in class, you will actually recognize some of the buildings at the top of it. The top left is the Hagia Sophia, which is now a huge mosque in what is today Istanbul. And then you have the Kaaba, which is in Mecca, on the right. So again, prayer rugs. And in certain countries, especially your predominantly Islamic nations like Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, things stop. When the signal for prayer comes, the cities completely come to a stopping point, and people get out of cars, people walk outside of their businesses, put their prayer rugs down and pray. And in the past, I've had several students go, praying 5 times a day, that's a lot. Well, let me break it down for you. You get up, you pray to be saying thank you for letting me get up. You pray over your breakfast, that's number 2. Pray over your lunch, that's number 3. Pray over your dinner, that's number 4. And pray before you go to bed, that's number 5. So, again, it's just making time for it. And these prayers aren't little simple prayers either. It's a very physical thing. It's not just bowing your head. It's a very fascinating thing. I would strongly, if you are interested in seeing what these prayers look like in the process, there's definitely plenty of YouTube videos out there to kind of demonstrate what a Muslim has to do when they do their prayers. Number 3 is giving to the poor. They call that giving alms to the poor. In my church that I attend, we give offering when the plate comes around. So that's kind of the same thing. And so it's a very fascinating concept that's both in the Christian faith as well as the Muslim faith. The Hajj. The Hajj is a very important part. It's a very expensive part that a Muslim should do. There are some exceptions to a Hajj. If you physically cannot take a pilgrimage, a trip to Mecca, then you have to prove that through your mosque that you cannot attend. Likewise, it's very expensive. So if you cannot financially do it, I believe, if I remember correctly, that can be an exception as well. But it is a very important part. There's a lot of little steps in the Hajj that people have to do. But it is, I'm sure it's a very memorable journey. Excuse me. Last is the fasting during Ramadan. Fasting means you do not eat, and students start freaking out when they hear that. And you don't eat from sunrise to sunset. It's a week-long holiday, and I've got family and friends who are Muslim, and when they talk about Ramadan and fasting, they've described it to be having like a Thanksgiving dinner each night once that sun goes down. You are allowed to have water. The more traditional views of Ramadan, they don't. And so it's this idea of thinking about being grateful for what you have. And so it's a very inter-reflective type of a holiday for Muslims. And that will do it. Again, I do apologize for the racket, the construction going on over in Miss Wise's room. I'm assuming that was hers. But anyway, be safe, take care, and I will see you next time.